Welcome to episode 8 on Matchday 8 of the Qatar World Cup 2022. This is the Ultimate Football Show podcast. My name is Chris, and in a special edition today, we're going to have a great chat with Stamford Chidge, who's a Chelsea football legend, not only a massive fan over the years, also a fan of England, of course, as well, but a season ticket holder. He's a podcaster, he's a broadcaster, he produces out podcasts with his mates on twice weekly basis for Chelsea, and is really an authority on the game, not only for those at Chelsea and Stamford Bridge, but for world football as well. And it was a pleasure to catch up with Stamford Chidge on this podcast to bring it to you here on episode number 8. We're very happy to support the lilywhitefoundation.com, advancing young people through sport. For more information, visit lilywhitefoundation.com. So in the first part of our interview with Stamford Chidge, we spoke about loads of Chelsea players, both former and present, who are at the Qatar World Cup this year around. But I started off by asking just how much is he enjoying the tournament so far?
It's really, really weird, Chris. In all honesty, I was not looking forward to this World Cup at all. It should never have been staged in Qatar for all of the obvious reasons, and some less obvious, like it's in a desert. It's in the middle of the Premier League season, and if you're into your football club as much as I am, then that takes priority, and that's a massive inconvenience to stop halfway through the season. And I kind of decided many years ago. I actually made a TV series on the World Cup back in 2006, where we covered every game every day for the entire month of the tournament. I mean, it was the best thing I've ever been involved with. I mean, I got to sit and watch matches with people like Ray Wilkins, Graham Lasso, Les Ferdinand. It was just, and I got paid to do it. It was nuts. And I got really into it, like in a completely different way than one normally does. And of course, England, were highly fancied then. Of course, a lot of Chelsea players in the side, and they went out. I think they went out to Portugal, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I'd got so into it, and I so believed that we were going to win it, that I was spent. I was done. I said, that's it. I don't have enough emotional bandwidth for both Chelsea and England, and I'm going to just focus on Chelsea, and I don't give a stuff about England anymore. So I kind of went into the World Cup this time around with that kind of attitude. But revelation upon revelation, I have really enjoyed it. I don't know, maybe it was helped by the fact that the second match was England versus Iran, and they absolutely stuffed them, and they played really, really well. And I watched an England game where I didn't even break sweat. I don't know, but I've really got into it, and I've really enjoyed it. And there've been some absolutely cracking matches. I mean, they really have. I mean, I was watching a bit of it was Australia, wasn't it?
It was Tunisia, Australia-Tunisia. It was
a really good game. It was a really good game of football, end to end, both sides having a go. I mean, Poland versus the Saudis, I watched a bit of that today, much the same. And I've really, really enjoyed it. I have to say, Chris, I wonder if my relationship with England and indeed the World Cup works in kind of in inversely to how Chelsea are doing.
Right.
So Chelsea have been rubbish this season. So maybe I'm kind of enjoying the World Cup more than I would had it been the other way around. And I have to say, after the awful draw against the United States last night, so many people on Twitter and our Discord group were saying, "My God, this is worse than watching Chelsea." Almost.
Mm-hmm. How much can you give of yourself, as you say, when you've got a team that you're so involved with? You're not just a supporter, a season ticket holder at Chelsea. You're part of the fabric. You write in the fanzine. You've written books with Mark and other people that go out there to the heart of Chelsea fans. You do a regular, much beloved podcast every week. I think it's twice a week actually, where you get former players on. You get the people that really matter. I mean, how much can you give? How much heart can you give to Chelsea in that respect, and then feel the defeat at the end of the day when things don't go so well? It must be almost like being, the manager or an assistant to Graham Potter this week?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, Chris. I mean, I think the reality is that the older I get, the less bad it is. I mean, even in the old days, actually, and I think anybody of our kind of generation who's lucky enough to go to matches will say much the same thing, that it really hurts and you're really angry or peed off.
Hmm.
But you go back to the pub with your mates, and a few pints later, suddenly that feeling dissipates. But having said that, I've got mates who will sulk for a week. They'll have a blackout totally, and they won't speak to anybody. They won't go to the pub. They won't watch it or read the newspapers or whatever. So everybody's different, but that's always been my way of getting it out of the system. And I have to say, actually, one of the great things about doing the Chelsea Fancast has always been it's been very cathartic. You talk about the game, you have a rant, have a moan, have a drink or two, and then by the end of it, you're all laughing and you've kind of forgotten about it.
I can't get to understand, and I'm not sure if I could do that after every game because sometimes it's just too much for you. Just sometimes 93rd minute, you just turn the TV off. You go, I don't want to listen to the pressers because it's going to be too depressing. Other times, you want you all over it and you want to listen to it for 20, 30 minutes. You've got to be almost a real pro just to go through all of that for yourself and for your audience, don't you?
Well, you do. I mean, it's an interesting point you make there. My attitude is completely different when I'm watching it on TV. I don't make every game. I mean, most of the away games I can't get to, and for work reasons, I'm not making many of the midweek games this year. But
yeah,
I hate watching it on TV, and I think it's because you feel disconnected. But more to the point, you feel kind of powerless. And I know it makes no sense, but when you're at the game, you kind of weirdly feel that you can influence what's going on. But when you're watching on TV, you just can't. And if we lose and I watch it on TV, I will have a proper sulk, and it will affect my mood for quite a few days. But I think it's also because I'm not down the pub with my mates, and that is a brilliant way to get through many things, let alone football.
that is so true. Except if you're in Qatar, I don't think there's many people down the pub in Qatar this tournament. Are there?
I've got mates out there, and one of them is a very big drinker, and he's a brilliant. I'm going to shout him out actually because he's an absolute legend. There's a guy called Kunal who drinks in the same pub as me on a match day, and he's a massive England fan, and he's famous for it. He bought a round of about 120 Jaeger bombs and the Green Man before.
Oh, God.
So he likes a drink or 10, and he says it's fine. It's no problem. They're all having a drink and they're all having a good time.
I feel a lot better for him now. I must tell him that.
I bet he had a few last night.
Well, I'm sure he probably needed a few last night, as we all did with that England performance. Let's talk about some of the Chelsea players. We'll talk about those that are still with the club, but I've got to talk to you about Belgium. And when you look at the spine of their team with Courtois, De Bruyne, Hazard, Lukaku, if he's fit, Batshuayi, who scored again. I mean, you can't believe the kid. He misses a 3-footer, scores a 20-yarder, and the guy's unbelievable. But those players that Chelsea let go over the amount of seasons, I mean, that's half the Belgian team. A lot of people saying Belgium are aging now. They did look a little bit jaded, I guess, in their victory. But we've let a lot of good players go, haven't we? Belgian players in particular.
Yeah, definitely. It was. I mean, the one I would always regret is Kevin De Bruyne. But I mean, the reality was, I watched Kevin De Bruyne when he played for Chelsea, and he didn't make an impact, But I didn't think Belgium looked too clever actually against Canada. I thought they scraped through a bit. I thought Canada played really, really well. But that was classic Michy Batshuayi, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, it was a good goal, I have to say. He took it really, really well. But I suspect it's because he had absolutely no time to think about it, because that was the story of his Chelsea career, wasn't it? He'd missed absolute sitters all the time and pop up with a really good goal now and again. It was a bit sad to see Eden Hazard. I think he looks the shadow of the player that he was when we had him at Chelsea. And I know he's had a torrid time at Real Madrid and a lot of injuries. Yeah, that saddened me a bit.
I think injuries will kill your career, though, won't they? We've seen it over the years. There were some injuries people just don't come back from. I remember there was an NFL player who was absolutely brilliant. He played NFL. He played baseball as well in the MLB. He was like unbelievable player. He got an injury. He never came back to where he was, and it looks that way with Hazard now. He's not going to get back to what we enjoyed when he was at Stamford Bridge, surely.
No, he's not. It was interesting to see that he's Belgium's captain, which I thought was interesting. So they obviously hold him in high regard. I mean, the real big loss out of all of that is old Big Nose himself, Courtois. And it was interesting. It was interesting, hearing the commentators and the pundits saying they reckon he's the best keeper in the world, and I think they may well be right. He's in a rich vein of form at the moment, and he has clearly been a loss to us because Kepa's never really got near to replacing him in terms of consistency, and of course Mendy had that lovely spell which ended up with us winning the Champions League, but his form's dipped now. So it's an area we've suffered a bit, really, isn't it, since he's gone? So, he's a loss. But it is weird, actually, isn't it? I think it's weird generally. You look around the Premier League as well, and you see so many former Chelsea players playing. You see so many Chelsea players who were youth players who didn't quite make it, who are playing elsewhere. And I mean, even as it stands, I think Chelsea have got the about the fifth highest number of players playing in the World Cup. And they would have been nearer the top had the injured players been out there. And that's been quite consistent over the last few World Cups. One other stat that I saw, it was the same kind of stat, actually. It was in The Athletic. Brighton have got more players out of the World Cup than Liverpool, which really made me laugh.
Yeah, I did mention that to Gary Chivers. We were talking about Ecuador, and they've got 3 in the squad, and 3 of them played as well, and they all played pretty well. And I said to him, can you believe that your old team, Brighton, have got 3 players that we're going to talk about on a World Cup podcast? And then once he got up off the floor, we talked about them. It is incredible, isn't it? I mean, Brighton, what a story. Although they seem to be moving Brighton a little bit up the coast towards southwest London at the moment, because we seem to be taking over there.
Indeed. I mean, I called our last podcast Newcastle 1, New Brighton 0. That's kind of where we're heading at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, pretty much.
That we could spend hours talking about, and that probably need another show. But
yeah. I think I thought I might probably need another recharge of battery before then. Let's talk about one game that's coming up on Sunday, Matchday 8, which is Spain-Germany. Obviously, Germany lost to Japan, surprisingly, having sort of been the favourites to win that. Spain demolished Costa Rica. First of all, isn't it great to see Dave, or Azpilicueta as he's quite commonly known, back in the Spanish team and doing so well for them when you thought his time with Spain was pretty much over? He couldn't get in for a couple of years, and then the Renaissance has come back and he's back in there.
Yeah, it was. I watched a bit of that one, and it was lovely to see Azpilicueta play. It was a bit weird as well. I mean, look, I think first of all, it's long overdue. I mean, Aspi should have been playing for Spain for far longer than he has. I mean, if you look at him at Chelsea, he's won it all. He's been our captain for a long time. He's the model of a consistent professional, and we all love him for it. The thing that I found interesting, and I found myself asking a question, actually, Chris, while I was watching. I mean, I know Spain absolutely stuffed Costa Rica out of sight, but I was sitting there thinking all season, love him as we do, we've been saying, you know what, his legs are gone. He can't play wing back for Chelsea anymore, and he's even struggling at right back these days because he can't get up and down. His delivery has never really been good, apart from that purple patch when he kept on firing balls in about, kind of 10 yards outside of the penalty area, if you like. And he was firing those balls in for Morata, funnily enough.
He was, yeah.
But his delivery's never been very good. And I'm thinking, and here he is playing for Spain, who I think are probably dark horses for the whole thing, actually. Everybody seems to have discounted them. But they've got a very young side. I think that's one of the reasons why they have, actually. But they were very impressive against Costa Rica. Yeah. And I think tomorrow's game against Germany, that's one to lick your lips for, isn't it? That's kind of a potential final, isn't it, really? If you see Spain versus Germany in an international match, that could be the final easily, couldn't it?
And the fact that Germany lost, for them it is the final, isn't it? A final, because they lose that, then they're not going to go anywhere apart from Hansi Flick or to the job centre, because they won't take that well down in the Bundesrepublik. I would be very unhappy about that.
I mean, you know what? I wasn't surprised that Germany lost that. I mean, we're doing a big we do a predictions league for the Premier League. All the people, well, not all the people who listen to the podcast, but some of us. And they've extended it out to the World Cup, and I've been taking part in that. And I think I predicted a 1-1 draw for that. So I wasn't surprised that they lost that. But I've heard a lot of people I know saying that Germany. I mean, they're ranked 11th in the world, which is not too shabby, but it's not really where you expect Germany to be. And you know, there's something not quite right with them. And I know they had a brilliant qualifying period. I don't think they lost a game, and they were on fire. They scored loads and loads of goals, but it kind of reminds me of what England used to be like.
Yeah,
you know, we would like win every qualifying. We're banging loads of goals. We look really, really impressive. Then the minute we play decent teams, we'd be rubbish. And that's maybe where Germany are at the moment.
I think Germany are in the situation that Chelsea have been in, unfortunately. They haven't got a centre forward that's been knocking them in like the old days of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge and Rudi Fuller and all those Gerd Mullers and Klinsmann and Oliver Bierhoff. They used to have them all in the past, but now Kai Havertz is a false nine. I'm not sure if that works in any level of football. He seems to score in the big games, fair enough. Scored in the Champions League final. And we mentioned this to Gary Chivers, and Gary said he won't score at Bournemouth on a wet win Wednesday night, but he'll score in the Champions League final. And you can just imagine him against Spain going there and doing the business, and everything's all rosy again. But they're lacking a real striker that they've always had over the years.
Yeah, I mean that you know exactly. They've had a brilliant history, haven't they, of great strikers going down, you know, through the years. I mean, Gerd Muller. I mean, I'm just about old enough to remember how good I used to love him as a striker. He was brilliant.
Yeah,
but
he turned on a sixpence, and he's like a Lineker. He just turned up in the box. He would never score from outside the box, but he was always there. A bit like Giroud is for France, just always there, isn't he?
I'm absolutely loving. I'm loving Olivier Giroud. I mean, we loved him at Chelsea hugely. It's a shame he went, but I can understand why he did. I think he's just incredibly underrated as a striker. You know, he's a big guy. He's got a lot of technical ability. He can hold the ball up. He can score with his head. He can score with both feet. I mean, what more do you blooming well want? You know,
Graham Souness has just launched into him to being a totally overrated player that's had so much luck in his life, and he's rubbish. Basically, it's what he's just said on the TV.
I must be right then if Souness has said that.
Exactly, you got spot on,
mate. I didn't pick Ali Dier to play for my side.
There you go. So Spain, Germany, what a game that is on the Sunday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I've got to ask you about one player that's at Germany that again Chelsea let go, and I don't know how much of the youngsters you get to see. I don't get to see them a lot, but this Jamal Musiala, we came across him as a really massive talent, and he's over now in Bayern Munich. I think he's still only 19, an incredible talent that Chelsea let go.
Yeah, I mean, like they have done with so many, Chris, and it's almost hard to keep up, isn't it, with actually how many people that we've let go. But I think actually in his case it was slightly different. I'm not entirely convinced actually that we kind of let him go. I think he's half German. I think he lived in Germany. One of his parents, I can't remember, but anyway, he's got massive German connections.
Yeah,
him and his family wanted to live in Germany and stay in Germany. I mean, he could have played for England, but he chose to play for Germany because I think I had an interview with him saying, "Oh, I feel German," you know. So maybe we didn't kind of carelessly let him go. Maybe we didn't have much choice, but. Yeah, he's hugely rated, isn't he? And he's clearly quite a player. This is what I don't get about Germany, Chris. You look at their lineup, right? I mean, the one that played Japan. Neuer's in goal. Süle, Rudiger, of course, used to be with us. Schlotterbein or whatever his name is. Raum, Kimmich, Gundogan, Gnabry, Müller, Musiala, and Havertz. I mean, Havertz, Musiala, Müller, Gnabry, Kimmich, Gundogan, Rudiger, Neuer. Really good players. Really. I mean, that team, I'd play that team, and I'd say I'd be worried playing that team. I don't know much about the other three, but I've heard that the defense is a bit suspect actually for Germany.
I don't think Schlotterbeck's the best defender they've ever had, to be honest. But
no,
Zula.
Indeed, and that's their weakness. But you look at the midfield and the attack. That's as good as anybody, isn't it? So God knows what they're going to do. I mean, it would be very German, wouldn't it, to squeak a win against Spain tomorrow and stay in it and then go all the way. That's the kind of thing they do, isn't it?
That's exactly how they play the game. Yeah, that's one thing we need to learn as an English mentality is just go out there and play the opponent and don't worry about what's happening on Thursday. Just happen on the day. Go and play it and see if you can sneak a win. And it doesn't matter. They said it doesn't matter how you get through the group phase as long as you get through it. I suppose that's true, isn't it?
I think it is. It's really. I mean, I was thoroughly pissed off watching it. It was just like watching Chelsea. There was too many backwards passing. They weren't creating anything, and it was dull, dull, dull. And Southgate, I felt didn't really make the right changes at the right time.
No.
However, two very important things. I thought the United States were absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Their pressing and their defensive discipline was superb. And of course, they were always going to be a threat on the break, which they proved. I thought they played really, really well. And of course, the Yanks are no mugs. People forget this. I mean, they're ranked 14th in the world. That's not too shabby, So they're not minnows anymore. They're a decent side, and they played to their potential. They were clearly very hungry to get a result against us, and they caught us on the hop. And it kind of reminded me, it's a bit like those matches we see in the Premier League, like, Chelsea versus Palace or something, or Chelsea versus Brentford, when they, it's kind of a bit like their cup final, and they really go for it. And if you're half a yard off it at the elite level, you're going to get done. And I thought we were lucky to get away with a draw. However, the other thing, I don't know why everybody was throwing their, toys out the pram, probably because they were a bit fed up with watching the dull football. But you're right. The reality is we actually gained a point. We're still top of the group. We're basically through. Wales have to beat us 5-0 for us not to go through. I mean, that ain't happening. I'm saying now, that ain't happening. If that happens, I don't know what I'll do. But they're not beating us 5-0, Chris. It's not happening.
I'm Gary Chivers, and this is the Ultimate Football Show podcast.
We're very happy to support the lilywhitefoundation.com, advancing young people through sport. For more information, visit lilywhitefoundation.com. Lovely stuff. Thanks so much to Stamford Chidge for joining us on episode 8 of the podcast. And Dave will be back with more conversation with me as we move through the competition. We'll be back on another episode in the future as we look towards the knockout stages and get his thoughts on what's happening at the World Cup 2022. So watch out for that on your Twitter feed, Instagram, and all over the place. We'll let you know when Stamford Chidge is back on the podcast. Well, that's all from us today for episode 8. Hope you've enjoyed our chat with Stamford Chidge. We'll be back for episode 9 as the World Cup continues in Qatar and the games just keep on coming. See you then.